So that's really a perfect time to do load management. Is it not better that he took off in the All-Star game rather than if he had missed 2 or 3 regular season games? Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Ben Kruse. This is another episode of Moving the Goalposts, and you can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Ben at Ben Kruse144 on Twitter. You can follow the show across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on ETBpodcast.com. And you can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcast. And make sure to like and subscribe. And this show is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right. So we are back after All-Star weekend. It's now some of the worst times in sports, February. It's actually one of the worst times in the year, February, because not only is sports slowing down, but the weather is still crappy. We had the NBA All-Star game, the whole All-Star weekend, all the festivities. There's a lot of talk about the format of the All-Star game. A lot of talk about here's the thing. I feel like in the 2010s and onward, the NBA All-Star Game became a lot more of a marketing sort of festivity than, say, a game that the players at least somewhat cared about. Like, I think that the 2010s and onward is when it sort of started to change, which I guess makes a certain amount of sense because all All-Star games are just like exhibition games anyway. That's really all they are. I'm no fan of any All-Star game. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, but I really never go out of my way to watch them. I actually think the baseball All-Star game is the best one.
Easily.
I think that's the best one because baseball is such an individualized sport, although basketball kind of is too to an extent. But it's a little different because in baseball, it's like, all right, well, I kind of want to see this, the guy on my team get up and get a shot or something like that. It's a little different in baseball.
Yeah.
But in basketball and football, I think, are just naturally behind the 8 ball when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to the format, especially football. I mean, football is just, we can get into that, but like football, I think, is behind the 8 ball more than anybody. And there's a lot of criticisms of the format. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't think the format is really all that bad. The format's not all that bad. Having it be first to 40, like for everybody criticizing it, first to 40, I think is much better than having like one game, like having a tournament basically that is first to 40 with 4 different teams and just making it a tournament is way better than playing 4 12-minute quarters and the score is 150 to 140.
Yeah.
I do think that's way better. So I don't know. I don't think the format is all that bad. I think it's good that the NBA tries to be at least somewhat how would I say, somewhat innovative when it comes to how they do things. I mean, sometimes they're a little too innovative.
Yeah.
There's good and bad to it. But overall, I don't think the format is all that. I don't know. I don't think the format's all that bad. I think it's okay. I just think there's only, look, an All-Star game can only be so good, especially in the era of load management. And this is a game that doesn't even count. So I kind of get it on some level.
Yeah, we could obviously talk about the Saturday night festivities like they typically have every single year. But when we're talking about the game, which Nick and I were on Playback. Speaking of Playback, on the stream last night for the network, yeah, just I didn't mind the format itself. I think that I was saying it last night that playing up to 40, I think there was a little. I mean, listen, nobody plays defense in the All Star game, but at least there's maybe a little bit kind of on the line, kind of later on in the games in terms of like you saw like the rising stars playing against Shaq's team, which had like all the veterans, and they're kind of going toe to toe. And it was just like, oh, like maybe we could have a chance to physically beat these guys and maybe have some bragging rights. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that the format itself is great. Obviously, the one thing that I think obviously many players hated and kind of really took away from at least some of the enjoyment of it was just how long it was. It was about 2 hours 10 minutes roughly kind of around. I know you were asking about in terms of yesterday how long typically the league team, NBA and MLB, NHL, all those type of games, how long they last for. And just the amount of like entertainment and obviously the stuff that was like in between all the games, that's where it kind of went a little too overboard. It's like, yeah, you could obviously have like couple, fan entertainment stuff. Obviously the fan that won the $100,000, I think, with the back and forth Dame Lillard, like that's cool and stuff. But then you put like the stuff with like the fishing kind of at the end, like it's like you can kind of wait that out because the game's already lingering on for so long. And if you want to do a tournament, it's great. But I just think that the way they have it all planned, it felt very rushed and just it didn't seem like everything was kind of rightly in chronological order for something that they're trying to change up.
Well, I'd say I don't like it. It did go by fairly quickly. All the games did like they all went by fairly quickly. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
exactly sure how long. I think that there were too many festivities in the middle of
yeah.
that last game. I mean, when did it start? 8 o'clock.
Well, I mean, obviously intros, I think, and then of course some of the stuff beforehand. I think it said 7:30, but I think the coverage is about half an hour, so I think the games roughly start around 8.
Yeah, okay. So the game,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess some of it, like my opinions on All-Star games have just generally evolved throughout my life. Like I would say when I was a kid, I really enjoyed All-Star games a lot more. Like I would want to watch all the All-Star games. Now it's like, especially, and at the time I used to vote in All-Star games. And by the way, it used to be, I don't know how it works now because I haven't voted in a long time, but it used to be that if you go to a game, they have a bunch of ballots that you can just fill out and submit.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, couldn't somebody just fill out like 100 ballots and
Yeah, no, I mean, now they obviously have like the
you don't
fan.
have to like sign or anything like that. There's no photo ID. Uh, that's something I was always confused about. It might be different now. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't
They
know.
really do anything besides baseball voted anyway, so.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I've never. Do fans even vote on the Pro Bowl?
Hmm?
Do
No,
fans
I don't
even
think at
vote?
this point in time.
All
I
right. Yeah.
mean,
So
listen, I think, and you were talking about this. I mean, I think the MLB. I mean, obviously, baseball is my favorite sport, so I'm a bit biased in terms of which games I think the best. But remember baseball back in the day, in terms of whoever obviously won between the American League and the National League would get the home field for the World Series. So it meant
yeah,
something. Like it's one thing specifically if like the All-Star game and stuff, like it's great of course for like the players and stuff to get a break. Sometimes for fans and stuff, they can go to a new city, they can obviously explore on this new city. That's cool and stuff. But like physically, like the last couple of years of like the game, it's like there's no meaning anymore. So it's just like, players go half-assed. They look at obviously the defense, no defense in the NBA. That's why I like the new thing we'll talk about a little bit in the NHL. They're replacing specifically instead of the All Star game a four nations country tournament, and that's I mean the
yeah.
action going on that it's
What
like
would
wow.
would that ever work in the NBA? I mean, in the NBA, the way it would have to be in order for it to be fair would be
Mhm.
for like maybe. I mean, there aren't enough players from any specific country outside of maybe the US or Canada for that to ever really work in the NBA. You'd have to
Yeah,
combine all the European players. And there's a lot of European players, but they're not all from one country. They're from all different
I,
countries.
I think they would. I mean, listen, I would prefer that than to have what's going on right now in terms of the All Star Weekend because I mean I think that the Saturday night stuff isn't the worst. I mean, it's not obviously the same as it once was, but the game, it's just there's just nothing to it anymore. It really isn't.
Yeah, well, but I was just thinking, like, if they were to do that in the NBA, they would have to. It would almost have to be like Americans versus non-Americans or something like that.
Yeah.
Like that's the only way it would be fair, or maybe like. I mean, there's a fair number of good Canadian players.
I feel like there would be people like from other countries that definitely be open to this, and you could obviously have it kind of like NHL, where NHL they obviously started a couple of games over in Canada.
But what are the excuse me? What are the four nations for the NHL? It's U.S., Canada, Russia.
It's U.S., Canada, Finland, and Sweden. Those are the four countries.
Those are the four countries. Aren't there a whole
Mhm.
bunch of Eastern European and Russian players?
Well, obviously a lot of them from the NHL. I mean, obviously some of the main ones are over in Canada. That I mean, I'm a Bruins fan. Brad Marchand, he's one of the guys on the Canadian team. Connor McDavid, one of the best players in NHL. He's on the Canadian team. Austin Matthews obviously plays for a Canadian team. The Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously during the year, he's on the USA team because obviously that's where he's from. So it's obviously kind of the NBA would have to kind of do something kind of similar to that, kind of like a very like short, very very shortened version of the Olympics, but like for kind of like only a couple games. But I feel like that'd be awesome. I think that would just like
Maybe.
a
But
global like
people would complain about that format too in different ways. I mean, maybe if you split it up, I mean, I don't know. I'm just starting to think about this. Maybe you could have like because it's all stars, so it's not exactly like it is true that a disproportionate share of NBA players are American, obviously, but
yeah.
of the stars, it's not exactly like that. Like star players are not disproportionately American.
Yeah.
Like I would argue 4 of the top 5 NBA players are not American right now.
Mm.
I mean, you got Jokic,
Luka.
Luka,
Hmm.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander,
He's Canadian.
and Giannis,
Hmm.
who are all not American. The problem is they're all from 4 different countries.
Right.
So how would but if you look at
They would have to maybe like combine countries possibly together. To be
maybe you
honest.
could like maybe if you were to combine Slovenia, Serbia, and Greece
Yeah.
for the European players or something like that, I guess maybe you could do that.
Yeah.
But the problem with that format though is that it's not sustainable long term. Which I don't know. I suppose is not a huge problem. You can change it anytime you want, but that's not really. It works now, but it might not work 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because we don't know where the best players are going to be coming from. I mean, it looks like more and more of them are European. Like the top draft picks seem to be French very often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting idea. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea for like American players to be on one team, the international players on another team, whatever. I guess that would make a lot of sense. But you know what? There would be complaints no matter what, because on some level, there are issues that there's nothing Adam Silver can do. There's nothing the NBA can do that will mitigate it enough or to bring it back to what it used to be. Right. And that's kind of okay because it's an exhibition game. It doesn't count for anything.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. It's not a playoff game. It's not a regular season game. It's just for entertainment. It's meant to, it's kind of, I also think it's a little bit targeted at children in a sense. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but it just kind of is targeted at children and adolescents more so than regular season games are. Because, that's kind of just what they want to see with these skills competitions and things like that.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing that, and just given that we live in this load management era of the NBA, there's really only so much you can do to make the All-Star game so great. There's really only so much you can do. I mean, players are sitting out regular season games. Some of the best players for load management. How great is the All-Star game going to be? Like LeBron basically called out sick, essentially.
Out of all things, he went up to his press conference and said, "Yeah, so I'm going to not be playing tonight in the game." It's like, really? Like,
well, no. Here's the thing. I don't take issue because apparently he had a sore ankle.
Yeah,
he wanted to rest. Okay,
I'm nothing against.
I don't take issue with this at all. My only issue is honestly that maybe he left it too much to the last minute.
Yeah.
That's the issue that I would have with it. And there's a lot of people talking about how Michael Jordan wouldn't have done this or Kobe wouldn't have done this because everything is about Michael Jordan and Kobe that has to do with
I don't
LeBron.
know.
Like if LeBron didn't tip enough when he goes to a restaurant, they'd be like, Michael Jordan would have tipped more than he did. Like, like it's so ridiculous. But I don't take issue with this at all because, first of all, you have to remember LeBron is 40 years old. So he has, even though he's playing great, he still has to be very sparing of how much he plays. I mean, like you even see it on defense. Like part of the reason LeBron doesn't play defense quite like he used to is because he just can't go as hard as he used to. He has to be a little bit more sparing. And it's the same thing with, how often he plays because eventually there is some wear and tear on your body. And I'm not necessarily a fan of load management entirely, but I kind of understand where it comes from a little bit, especially in this era of constant injuries. And for somebody and all I can say to you is for people mad about this is, okay, you got a point if you're like, why did he leave this to the last minute? I don't know exactly the reason. I mean, maybe it just ended up feeling a lot worse than he thought it would. That's certainly possible. But it's like, okay, like in the All-Star break, it's what, a week long? Something like that in a span where normally you would play 2 or 3 games. So that's really a perfect time to do load management. Is it not better that he took off in the All-Star game rather than if he had missed 2 or 3 regular season games? Like, what if it had happened? Like, what if it had gone so that he played in the All-Star game and then ended up missing 2 or 3 regular season games immediately after the All-Star break? How would people have reacted?
Well,
they said, "Oh, you just played in the All-Star game." So you can't have it both ways. You can't be on one hand be mad at load management during the regular season, and then when he takes off in an exhibition game, so that maybe he doesn't have to take off real games that actually matter. Like, how can you get mad at him for that? Like, I'd rather him take off on the All-Star game. I mean, it's not even like you really need him there anyway. There's a whole bunch of stars. It's the All-Star game. It's not. He's not that important to the All-Star game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. There's a whole bunch of other guys there.
Yeah.
It's not even like a regular season game.
I personally have nothing against him sitting out, and the Lakers are actually. They're playing on Wednesday, so they're the earliest game out of any other team specifically. So I think he was also looking like ahead in terms of like, all right, I don't want to miss any second half games. And if we're one of the first teams to come back as well for the second half, it's like, I don't want to risk my body and play in a meaningless type of game, no offense to them, in which I've already played in countless times already in my career. I'm getting up there in age. I just want to try to keep my body as fresh as I can for a 40-year-old to be ready to come in for next year or for the second half and try to see if they get a championship.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, now that they have Luka Doncic, they're legitimate championship contenders. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they're the favorites to win the championship or that it's even likely. Like if you bet on it, you probably get a lot of money out of it. But yeah, they're contenders now. They're contenders more than they were before. So, if it's all about winning, which everybody seems to agree it's all about winning, well, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
You can't have it both ways. And the All-Star game, and like I said, like back in the day, the All-Star game was just sort of like it meant a little bit more. Now, there's no reason it meant more. It just kind of did like 20 years ago. Nope. But now it just doesn't. Now it really just doesn't. And by the way, sitting out in the All-Star game makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm sure you remember this. Pedro Martinez sat out in the All-Star game all the time. Yeah. He almost never played. Mm-hmm. I wasn't exactly sure why, other than just getting rest, but he almost never played in the All-Star game.
I just think it was something he purchased. Some people that are All-Stars, they just make it as a decision. It's a personal decision probably.
And we see a lot of criticism, and this is one thing in the All-Star in the format that I really, really like is the dunk contest. And Mac McClung won another dunk contest. Now, this is actually like probably my favorite thing about the All-Star format, which is getting G League players to be able to participate in the dunk contest. I think that's great. I don't think it should just be the best players that we've all heard of. I mean, having players that otherwise nobody would have ever heard of participate in the dunk contest, I think is great. I think it's great. Now, I didn't watch the dunk contest, but if I do think that's a great thing that they do. I mean, is it better if, like, there are some people who criticize that because he's not an NBA player? Like, so what? Like that's what makes it so great, because it's just a dunk contest. It should just be the best dunkers. You don't have to be one of the best basketball players in the world to be one of the best at the dunk contest.
Right.
Like I don't know. I think that's actually pretty good that it's great actually that they do that. Like, otherwise, nobody would have ever heard of Mac McClung otherwise. And I think it's really cool that a G League player can actually win the dunk contest.
Yeah, no, I mean, even before, so McClung obviously has won the last 3 years, but before that, people were complaining that the slam dunk contest was kind of washed. Not a lot of people were participating about it. Just nobody liked it anymore. And now you're obviously complaining that a G League player who just won the last 3 years, it's a bad thing for the product. It's like, I thought you're trying to continue to make this product watchable, and you're having somebody specifically that is open and doing it, and he's very, very good at it. So, like you're talking about, the dunkers that are very, very good, that's who they should be having to open to have. I know that obviously John Morant tweeted out throughout it saying that he'd be open to potentially doing it, and Giannis kind of followed up with that, potentially saying that maybe that too. Like, yeah, that's great, and that's what I think that they should be doing. But if you obviously want to keep a watchable product going, and McClung is obviously doing these 360s, these 180s type of dunks, it's like, go with it, man. Like, you're obviously really, really enjoying it. Like, and if people don't like it, then they don't have to watch.
Yeah, but like the thing is, I don't understand the argument that, like, oh, it's not a good thing because he's not an NBA player. Look, I will say, I'm not a fan of All-Star games in general, and I'm not a fan of some of the things the NBA does, namely like the NBA Cup and things like that. But I will say the NBA probably has done the best job at trying to be innovative with their All-Star weekend and their skills competitions. I mean, baseball's done okay, but they've also made sort of minimal changes, whereas, and it's also because they don't really have to make a ton of changes in baseball. It's just a little different, obviously. But in basketball, they're really like brainstorming all of this a lot. It seems like they're trying to be a bit more creative, and some of the stuff really is better than the previous format. Is really what I'm saying. Some of the stuff really is a lot better. I saw Draymond Green criticize the format.
He said a couple things. Something about the Rising Stars game, how it was like a JV game.
Yeah, I don't understand why that's so terrible. Hold up. Let me just pull it up. He said, he was criticizing the Rising Stars in the All-Star game. I just want to pull up the quote. He said, I had to work so hard to play on Sunday night of All-Star weekend. And because ratings are down, because the game's bad, we're bringing the Rising Stars. That's not a fix. I never played in the Rising Stars game. My first 2 years, I didn't touch that game. And these guys get to touch the All-Star floor on Sunday night. And then he kept going. He says, you work all year to be an All-Star. You get to play up to 40, and then you're done. This is so unfair to Victor Wembanyama, who just took this game very seriously. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who just took this game really seriously. When you're talking about chasing after the points record, Melo and Kobe, all of these guys who have had great scoring nights, you don't get the opportunity to do that with this game. Also, we can watch some Rising Stars. Now we get the treat of watching the Olympic team play against an under-19 team. Come on, what are we doing? He's wrong about this. I didn't have to read that whole quote. It was a waste of time. But he's wrong. I think he's completely wrong. I think it's good that you can see Rising Stars.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why that's such a terrible thing. Now, just because it's not like the old days doesn't mean it's so much worse. I don't get that claim.
And they've done it the last couple of years, and we really haven't heard anything bad about it then. So I don't know.
But, like, I don't think that's such a bad thing, because, like, now we're seeing players that are kind of that otherwise wouldn't. Like, why is it bad that a whole bunch of players that otherwise wouldn't have made the All-Star game are now able to make it. It's not like the 12th guy off. It's not like the 7th guy off the bench is making the All-Star game as a rising star. It's just it's rising stars. It's the best of the really young players.
Yeah. I mean, Wemby's one of the most prolific names out there already in NBA. Not because he's 7 foot, but it's something specifically that could be a transcendent generational talent, and he's not even, a veteran yet. And so people obviously want to make a thing about rising stars not being a thing. Look at Victor Wembanyama as a clear example.
Yeah. So Draymond Green's been in the news a lot. Hey, by the way, for a current player, he's in the media quite a lot, Draymond Green. for a current player. He also criticized the NBA about involved like 3-point shooting. Hold on a second. Let me pull that quote up.
While you're saying that,
he said, here's what he said. He said, NBA games, he basically said NBA games are boring and there's no substance. He said, I'm trying to pull it up. Yeah, he said games are very boring and there's no substance is basically what he said. And it's all about 3-point shooting. In a nutshell is basically what he said. I don't have the exact quote.
Ironic
I'll pull it up. What's that?
That's so ironic he said that because just look at the dynasty teams that he was a part of.
I know.
Legitimately, dude, look at yourself in the mirror. You had what you called the Splash Brothers, in which everybody had to see you guys specifically go crazy at. And I heard no peep from him during that point in time. So obviously, why now after Klay Thompson, of course, the duo left. Now you have to hear it, Like it's one thing specifically. It's like, yeah, too many 3-pointers, this and that for a couple of teams. Okay, it's what it is. But you're making it specifically after the dynasty that you had, pretty much based off of a very heavy 3-point type of offense. Two of the most prolific shooters in the game. I just think that's extremely ironic.
It is ironic. However, okay, so here's the full. He said, every possession is some type of chest move. You don't get that today in the NBA often. You don't just get that on a regular basis. It's just who can run faster, who can hit more threes. It's no substance. I think it's very boring. Now, the thing is that like it is true that he was on those Warriors teams that really did fit that description in a lot of ways. Now, in fairness, I do think there were a lot more chess moves on those Warriors teams than they get credit for.
Right.
I think Steph Curry is obviously known for being the best 3-point shooter of all time, but I think that he's underrated in his ability to do things other than shoot threes. Definitely. Like if you watch those Warriors teams, I wouldn't argue that that's entirely true about them, that it was just about who can run faster and who can shoot more threes, although those were the two biggest strong suits, which is that they played like really fast offenses and obviously shot a bunch of threes. But there was a certain level of like chess moves, so to say, on those teams. Now, the other thing is, it is true that Draymond Green is saying all of this and played on that Warriors team. It doesn't really mean he's wrong. Like the fact that he happened to be on that Warriors team and sort of benefited from it doesn't mean it's really just a matter of opinion. It doesn't mean he's incorrect. You can still be correct.
He's not wrong. I just think it's really funny. The fact is, like, you want to criticize it, but you specifically played for a team for a long period of time that was very heavy based off of it.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, he still is on that team, although he still is. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's hypocritical or anything like that. He just happened to be on that team, and it doesn't make him entirely wrong. He's not entirely wrong about that. Look, all sports, especially basketball, go through certain phases and sports are at somewhat of a disadvantage because it's not like entertainment or TV shows where everything is sort of scripted. Because like with entertainment, it's like, all right, so we can make the show more exciting just by, doing this or doing that. Basketball is different. It's like, or any sport for that matter, is just different because it's a competition. It's not, you're not hiring actors to do certain storylines. I mean, sure, you can change the rules a little bit to make it a little bit more like entertaining for your average fan, but there's only so much you can really do. Because ultimately it's really just about the players and the coaches. And, you know, there's only so much you can do to change the product on the court or in the field. And basketball has had this problem for a long time. Just going through phases like the post Michael Jordan, pre LeBron era of like in the early 2000s, when, you know, you just had a whole bunch of, that was the era of like the scoring point guard, like the point guard that, you know, scored 30 points a game that didn't win championships. That's basically what it was in the early 2000s in the NBA. And then the LeBron era came along. It was a bit more of a renaissance. Like that's just kind of what happens in sports. Like, you know, there, you know, in football, the Patriots era or the Chiefs era or whatever. It's like that in every sport. And basketball right now is struggling a bit, I would say. Not like baseball. Baseball's not struggling because the best teams are in major cities.
Yeah,
that's another reason. And basketball, for many, I mean, it's not like this now. It's sort of changing in a good way for them. But a lot of times, for quite a while, I mean, like the big cities did not have good teams in basketball, which is always going to be like for some time. The Knicks and the Lakers were both really bad, and that's not great for the league. And there's really nothing you can do about that.
So Celtics for a long period of time, like in the low to mid 2000s, before obviously they won their first championship, they were a very average team. So yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah. So that's just always how it is in sports. I do want to talk about Kevin Durant a little bit.
Yep.
So there's been a lot of talk about Kevin Durant getting traded. And by the way, he just scored 30,000 points. So good for him. But there's been a lot of talk about where he's going to get traded. He has another year left on his contract. And people are talking about how he's going to get traded next year. So I was thinking of where he might actually go. He might even pick his spot. I don't know if you have any thoughts on where he might go.
Yeah, no, I have a couple places. Obviously, there was a ton of smoke that he was going to go at this year's trade deadline. You know, and obviously Golden State, they were calling for stars left and right. I mean, Jimmy Butler obviously signed there, but they had him, they had Paul George, they obviously Kevin Durant, they had a bunch of guys. And Kevin Durant, when they called Kevin Durant specifically about him going back to Golden State, he basically said that, no, I don't want to go back to reunite with Steph Curry and Golden State. I don't think it's because he doesn't like the team. I just think specifically it's almost like it's a been there, done that type of thing.
Yeah.
He already went there. He already won a championship. So he wants to go to somewhere else. And he's been at different other teams before. I mean, he was with the Supersonics. He was with, obviously, the Brooklyn Nets. He was with the Warriors. He's been all over, obviously, now with the Phoenix Suns. I think he wants to go out west to me and obviously team up with another star. Or maybe he wants to do his own thing. I mean, Houston is in a really good situation right now. They're a really big team to watch out for. They have a ton of assets. You know, they obviously can, you know, figure something out. But if he's a free agent coming up in a couple of years, I mean, theoretically they can trade him up next year. Sounds like Brian Windhorst, he was very, very tight in the ESPN, pretty much said that the Suns could potentially be in a massive rebuild this offseason. And, you know, Bradley Beal's contract is absolutely abysmal, so they can't really trade him. So the next big star, basically domino to come down from that, is Kevin Durant. So, yeah, I mean, Houston, I think, is a team to watch out for. In terms of the East, I mean, I wouldn't go with the Knicks, but like I always feel like from afar, like the Knicks have always been kind of a team that Kevin Durant could be open to going to because, of course, the New York, the big market type of factor. Kevin Durant's very, very good under the bright lights, and he's obviously already played in Brooklyn. So, I mean, I don't see that happening. I mean, I think more likely than not, if he does go somewhere, I think it's going to be more on the West Coast, like Houston, Oklahoma City is another really good situation there too.
Do you think he might have the same attitude at Oklahoma City that he did about the Warriors? Been there, done that?
I don't know, because OKC was a long time ago, and obviously it was a big three type of situation. And OKC, I mean, they're right there to win a championship. I mean, they have a shit ton of assets they can trade up, right? So they have a very good situation. It's not specifically not only the preference he wants to go to, but the overall situation. And I think that OKC is in a very good situation where they already have a star there, a very young budding star in SGA, and they have all the assets in the front office in which they're very aggressive when it comes to that. So I think when I look at him, OKC is a very good situation. Um, I mean, you could look at other places as well too. I mean, that are on my mind, but I mean, Miami. Apparently, Miami was another place that apparently, if it wasn't for Golden State, Miami, of course, was on his radar. But I don't know, Miami with Pat. I mean, Pat Riley has kind of shown he's getting older up there in age. He doesn't really want to go for the big fishes anymore. I mean, he hasn't really been spending a lot. So, if there's any teams right now, Nick, I think it's be coming from the West Coast, and I think it's coming to go from teams like a team like Houston or a team like OKC, in which it's a young team, but they have some talent coming in, and I think they could kind of come in and be the extra piece to try to win a championship.
Well, I was thinking maybe it wouldn't be quite the same thing with Oklahoma City, whereas the Warriors, it's all other than Klay Thompson. It's like a lot of the same players
Yeah, and
that
it
he
was
played with. Like the Warriors team that he played on looks the same now as it did like 10 years ago. Whereas which is a bit unusual. That doesn't usually happen. Whereas Oklahoma City, it's like entirely different players. There's probably not one player that was on the Thunder 10 years when Durant was on them
Harden
that
and
is still on them. So it's a totally different team.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was thinking, do you think he might have the same attitude about going back to New York? I understand he was on the Brooklyn Nets, but it's still going to be playing in New York City.
There
could be the same thing. And knowing Durant, that's not the most that wouldn't be the most uncharacteristic thing of him, because he's very sensitive and I don't think wants to deal with the New York media, or might have that attitude. I'm not saying he definitely does, but he might have that attitude. And by the way, the light is much brighter if you're on the Knicks than if you're on the Nets. It really just is.
No, I agree. I mean, I think if you're Kevin Durant, if he's going to go to somewhere, it's going to be specifically a mid-market to bigger size type of market. I don't see him going a small market type of team. I just don't see a not only the teams. I mean, like the Wizards, right? I mean, he's obviously from that area. Who in their right minds think that he would go to the Washington Wizards unless specifically he want to be closer to home, right?
Yeah.
I talk about situations. He wants to go to somewhere like you mentioned, New York. New York's obviously been a place that he's already played before. He could obviously, his brand, right? You obviously kind of have to take into account too. If he wants to go to a specific type of place, it's the fit, the front office situation, the long-term vision, and what he could grow in terms of his brand. And so a team like, New York, I mean, obviously the Celtics, obviously, if it wasn't for a lot of situations, I'd be open to it, but the Celtics already have a great car going that I don't want to obviously break it all apart now with Brown and Durant. I don't want to really do that. But yeah, just kind of a team like that in terms of they have the vision, they have the pieces, and they just want to get that extra star because let's be real, Kevin Durant, he went to Golden State. They needed about one extra piece, especially after I think it was the 73-9 team that they didn't win from. And then I think it was couple years after that, they brought in that piece and they won a championship. So Kevin Durant, we talked about, obviously, you mentioned Kyrie Irving yesterday on our playback stream. Second fiddle, second option type of this. Kevin Durant could be a very, very solid one option, but he's a very, very, very good second option for a team that really needs to be able to win a championship.
Well, what team would he? I mean, how many teams would he go to where he would be a second option? The only one I could think of would be the Mavericks. I'm sorry, the Thunder.
Right, yeah. I mean, and like I said, I think it'd be a very, very, very good first option. Don't get me wrong, but
he'd be a first option almost anywhere he goes, would he not?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that he is. I mean, if you look at SGA right now and KD, you can make an argument right now. I mean, SGA is, in terms of numbers wise,
well, SGA is definitely a better player than Durant is right now. But other than SGA, like where else would he go where he wouldn't be the first option? He would be Batman, not Robin, if he went anywhere else, really.
Right.
Or any of the team. I mean, not anywhere, but the teams that we're talking about.
I mean, Golden State, obviously. I mean, I think Steph personally is a better player than Durant, but you make an argument that Durant's better than him. So I mean, yeah. The only other place that he could be a second fiddle to, anyway, if there's anything, would be OKC. So he wants to be the specific main guy, and he deserves it because he's one of the best top 5 players in the game. It's just a matter specifically about kind of the things I already mentioned about the brand, the fit, and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, look, if he were to go to the Knicks, I would go crazy. That would just be amazing.
What about the Clippers? I was thinking about that as well too. He's never played in LA, right? You could play. You could have Durant with Harden, and I mean, Durant's always feel like Durant too. He's kind of been like the super teams. Like he's kind of just got into the niche of like being
Yeah.
with all the super teams. It's not his fault, but you would have. I mean, talk about LA hoops, like peak hoops with Durant of the Clippers, with Kawhi and Harden against LeBron and Luca long term. I mean, that's just peak basketball. So there's a ton of things I think to look out for.
Well, imagine him and Harden on the same team together again.
That's another thing why I
I'd
thought
love
about.
to see that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Right.
But yeah, he might. Yeah, maybe he wants to play in LA. I don't know.
Because he's
It's not
already played. I
exactly.
mean, talk about big markets. He's already played in New York. I mean, Chicago, the Bulls just aren't a rebuild, so they suck. So I'm like, all right, New York, go to LA. Maybe you already clinched that, right? So he can kind of do his own like carousel, I guess, in a way, if he really
Yeah.
wanted to.
So I also want to talk a little bit about the Knicks, and how good are they really?
Mhm.
Because right now I would say the Knicks are like the third best team in the East,
Yeah.
and that's also where the standings are. Like other than the Cavs and the Celtics, I think the Knicks are right up there. The Knicks are one of the best scoring teams in basketball, like one of the best offensive teams in basketball. The offseason moves that they made, getting Bridges and Towns, I think just have proven to just be great moves. Um, and like their offensive output is just unbelievable. The only issue is the defense. Their defense is not really up to par, which is odd because Tom Thibodeau is a defensive minded head coach and usually has really good defensive teams. But yeah, the Knicks defense is not totally great. It could be better.
Yeah, when I look at the Knicks, you're spot on, right? They're easily a top 5 team in the East. They're a top 3 in my mind. The only other 2 teams are my Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that's obviously not a knock on the Knicks. It's just obviously the facts as of right now. But the Knicks have a very, very good starting 5, right? You have Brunson, you have Hart, you have Bridges, you have Towns, and you have OG. When OG's obviously been banged up the last couple weeks here, very, very good starting 5. Obviously, offensively great. If OG's in, obviously playing starting 5, very, very good defensively. Um, Towns, right? Put in Towns obviously over Harkenstein. Harkenstein's obviously a massive part in terms of what they were doing the last couple of years when it came to defensively and the rebounding. So I do think that they lost the rebounding aspect within the last couple of years, and the bench as well too. I mean, to be fair, I mean the Bridges move was obviously great, but you had to trade a lot. I mean, 4 or 5 was it couple first and second rounders, I think, from it. I don't even remember it as a whole, but
For Bridges, it was a lot of draft picks, but I was fine with them. I don't
yeah,
remember exactly what it was, but I talked about it at the time, and I was like, I think this is totally fine.
no, it was good. I mean, I'm obviously not having a knock on it, but the bench. I mean, you have Paint.
Yeah, there's not much depth. There's not
You have,
much depth.
yeah. Precious Achua. You have I said Payne. Tyler Kolek. It's just, and there's obviously a knock on the team, but I mean, the Celtics kind of had that like that last year. I mean, even though they won the finals, there's been a couple Celtics teams that the bench is just not their strong suit. And when it comes to the playoffs, you're able to have a pretty good regular season where you have a very lackluster type of bench. But come playoff time, it really, I mean, especially if you're, overplaying minutes of guys like Towns and guys like Brunson, the minutes and stuff, it really will take a toll when it comes to the playoffs specifically. Um, but no, the Knicks they're a very, very fun team, and they stay healthy? Yeah, they could definitely be a force to be reckoned with. Come playoff time, they just got to really have to figure out their defense and to see what kind of production they got on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like they're way behind the Cavs. Although I think in both conferences right now, it just seems like the haves and the have-nots in a sense, or not even the haves and the have-nots, but like one team or a few teams that are like way above everybody else. Like in like right now, at least in terms of record in the West, like Oklahoma City, they were like 8 games above Memphis, who was the next best team in terms of standings. Uh, in in the East, it's the Celtics, it's the Cavs, Celtics, and Knicks
Yep.
that are way ahead of the Pacers, which was the next best team. But I don't think that just because like the Cavs and the Oklahoma City record wise are the 2 best teams. But I don't think that means necessarily that they're going to be the best in the playoffs. Like there are times when the best regular season team that's built great for the regular season really just isn't that great in the playoffs, and that can really happen a lot. Like the Hawks 10 years ago. They were really good, and they were a really good regular season team, and they made the Eastern Conference Finals. But that was because it took them 6 games to beat the Nets, and because the John Wall got hurt on when they played the Wizards, and the Wizards probably would have won that series otherwise. So they really weren't all that good of a postseason team, but they were really good in the regular season. So you just never really know. I'm worried a little bit that might be an issue with the Knicks a little bit, given their sort of relative lack of depth and the fact that they're not great on defense. And I'm worried because the thing is that the Knicks, a lot like the Mets this upcoming season, have a lot of expectations, way more than they did last year. And if they get bounced in the first round, and I'm not saying that I think that's going to happen, but if they get bounced in the first round, that is a failure of a season.
Oh, 100%.
Like they can't get bounced in the first round. Maybe it's acceptable if they lose to the Cavs or the Celtics, but they cannot get bounced in the first round. They really have to make a run.
You guys, I mean, obviously we're 2-0 against you guys in the regular season, but like you guys could theoretically beat us in the definitely give us a run for definitely. I think you guys could give us a run for our money. Definitely the Cavs as well too. But the Knicks have been really good against the Cavs in the last couple of years. So it's like you talk about the Cavs, you talk about OKC and being these number 1 type of teams in the regular season, but sometimes when it comes to the matchups, it's like it doesn't matter what seed that they are. As long as you have that matchup and you've played this team with familiarity, sometimes it doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, the second half of the season is coming up and, there's just more expectations.
100%.
Did you see this? Patrick Mahomes Sr. is going to be fighting John Rocker in Rough and Rowdy.
I mean, listen, he's already fighting guys specifically, off the street. Patrick Mahomes Sr., before apparently this. So I'm not surprised. I do want to send my regards, though, my prayers really quick. I mean, obviously outside this topic, but it's within the Mahomes family. Apparently, there was a death in the family after, I think, the Mahomeses, after Patrick lost in the Super Bowl. I think it was the uncle, I'm pretty sure.
I thought it was a grandparent.
Grandparent. Maybe it was a grandparent.
It was an older person.
So obviously, but I obviously do want to send my regards, obviously, since we're talking about it. But yeah, no, I'd be curious to see in terms of how this goes. I don't really have anything else to mention, but I know
they're going to be fighting in Rough and Rowdy.
Okay.
And the weird thing is how it started in the street when Pat Mahomes Sr. saw him. He was yelling at him, and it didn't look like John. I mean, John Rocker kind of has a reputation for being a jerk, but Pat Mahomes did not. It seemed like he started it.
No, I think I know. You're talking about the viral clip specifically of like the sidewalk or whatever, and kind of something like I'm ready to like sock you in the face or whatever.
Yeah. And I wasn't exactly sure why, but I think it's probably because John Rocker was like talking about how the Chiefs get all the calls and things like that on social media.
No, it's probably something like that.
It seems like that's probably why.
Yeah.
Because it didn't, like, the fight that happened, it didn't really seem like John Rocker started. It seemed like Pat Mahomes was the one who started it. Yeah, I don't know what it is with Patrick Mahomes, but his family is just like the worst supporting cast. He has like I'm not saying his family isn't supportive of him, but my God, he is in the news because of his family so much. Whether it's his wife, his brother, his dad. I mean, I blame him for his wife because, he chose to marry his wife. But, you don't choose your brother or your dad. So, yeah, his family is just in the news and screwing him all the time.
Yeah, no, the Mahomes family, it's one of a kind, and a lot of it hasn't been for the great situation. I know, obviously, I still remember Brittany going to Gillette Stadium when obviously Patrick was playing my Patriots, and basically saying how the fan base of ours was giving her and the Chiefs fans crap coming into the stadium. It's like, all right, I understand, obviously the banter here left and right, but all of the noise that she would be making. I remember like when she first came into the league specifically, as a sport Patrick, she was insane. Like in terms of the viral stuff that she would have specifically. And I think it's obviously been a little bit better as the last couple seasons, but just the overall kind of the vibe of the family. I mean, Jackson obviously being the TikTok guy and all this stuff that he gets criticized for with that.
It's not even just TikTok. He got accused of like sexual assault.
No, that's just one of many things that he's been in the news for. So, yeah, it's crazy. It really is.
Yeah. So I also I want to talk a bit about Aaron Rodgers and whether or not he will stay in the NFL. And the short answer is it depends on his next ayahuasca trip. That's really all it is. It depends on his next ayahuasca trip. And I mean, the short answer is, contrary to popular belief, he can still play.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, probably the bottom half like he was last year, but he still can play. Mm-hmm. And it would be the most Jets thing if he went somewhere else and like excelled on that other team. Would it not be? Would it not be the most Jets thing if that were to happen?
Yeah, but I mean, you look at the overall stats for Rodgers this past year, people were making it out to seem like he had an awful year. It wasn't even that bad when I looked at the overall stats for him. And that's why I think specifically he's going to stay an extra year, because there's still stuff there with him. And, I understand at this point in time, body's breaking down. Yeah, his body's breaking down because he's freaking 40 plus years old age-wise. It happens when guys get older up there in age. But like the last couple weeks, I know it was kind of meaningless games, but his numbers were great. The first couple of games of the season were great. I know obviously in the mid part it wasn't great, but there's still stuff there for Rodgers in which I could look at it. I mean, I could ask you, Nick, in terms of potentially a couple teams that maybe could look at him. I could potentially see him going to Pittsburgh, kind of similar situation like Russ. If Russ obviously leaves because he's a free agent, because Mike Tomlin always seems to feel like he gets the best out of like kind of the guys at their last leg. Or if he goes to Tennessee, because Tennessee is kind of where the retirement guys, or the guys specifically that are just trying to play at the end of their careers, to just basically finish off their careers at. But yeah, I don't know.
The problem with Tennessee is the team around him is so bad.
Yeah. I mean,
you can't really say the same thing about the Jets, where the team around him was actually fairly good in a lot of ways. But yeah, I do agree. Aaron Rodgers did not have as bad of a season as you might think he did. Mm-hmm. Given the fact that you also have to consider that, like, you also just kind of have to consider that, like, he also had a lot of drops. A lot of his receivers ran the wrong routes, dropped the ball. And I'm not saying all of the miscommunication, none of the miscommunication was on Aaron Rodgers, but there was a unique amount of it and a lot of flubs that came from the wide receivers. There are just a lot of bad drops coming from the receivers on the Jets this year. So you have to take that into account too. And he went 28-11 touchdowns to interceptions. Now, mm-hmm. There are some games that the Jets lost where Rodgers was not really the problem. There were also some games where he really, really was the problem. Like if they just put up like 6 points or something like that, it's like, well, that's kind of on the quarterback. But so there was a little bit of both. But just because he's not a great player like he once was doesn't mean he can't still play, because he can. Mm-hmm. He certainly can. And you have to remember, Peyton Manning was on his last legs too at one point. Mm-hmm. And that's when he won the Super Bowl. The last year of his career, he was horrible. People forget that. Yep. So Aaron Rodgers is probably better than, or at least this past year, was better than Peyton Manning was at that time. He really just was.
I also think
Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl. So he could still play. He might not want to, but he still could.
Yeah, I was going to say really quick, sorry to cut you off, that the Raiders, too, could be a team to watch out for as well.
The Raiders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're obviously, I don't know, Brady obviously being a part-time owner, and he obviously a good relationship with him, maybe to finish off his career. I don't know. It's kind of
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much that would have to do with. I mean, maybe you never know. I guess you could convince him. Nobody would have thought he was going to go to the Jets. Who knows?
I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. No. Maybe.
Mm.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. And yeah, the point is the guy can still play. And he threw for like 229 passing yards a game, which is not great. It's also it would have been a little higher maybe if his receivers knew how to catch passes.
Mhm.
So there is that too. And yeah, he can still play for sure.
Yeah.
You see this Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito thing. Jonathan Martin admitted that the bullying thing never happened.
I have no idea about this.
You didn't hear about this?
No, I must be living under a rock, but yeah, if you want to tell me about it.
Well, you remember the story when it happened, right?
Yeah.
About Richie Incognito being a bully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And basically he says he never believed he was bullied. He comes out and says he never believes any of this actually happened. He never considered any of it to be bullying. And basically that it was just easier to, not tell the truth about it.
That's crazy.
Because he says it's a story that I've been trying to fix for 10 years. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's either he did it or didn't. That's really it.
Well, yeah, kind of. I'm just a little confused because why didn't he say it at the time?
Yeah.
Like he basically, like, it sounds like apparently his mom got involved and said that he was being bullied, which I guess at the time bullying was like a really big topic.
Mhm.
So I guess that's why it was such a big deal.
Yeah.
But he's coming out and saying, yeah, I really wasn't bullied at all, which is just crazy that you come out now 11 years after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, 10, 11 years ago, it's like you don't even remember probably like half the details even from it, besides the fact that he got accused of being bullied. Like,
yeah, I mean, I remember when it happened and it was a huge scandal. It was just and now he's coming out, like, I don't know, I thought that was a little bizarre. I mean, it was just, I'm a little confused by it. I'm honestly just a little confused with what he's saying. And Richie Incognito got blackballed for this. Like, he can't even be like a broadcaster now. Like he can't, like, it was just, it totally destroyed his career. I don't know. It really, really bizarre. Really bizarre. And yeah, I don't know why he couldn't say something earlier. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe he tried to fix. I don't know, but it didn't seem like it. So last story. You see this Illinois jersey gaffe? You see?
yeah, the jersey of Terrence Shannon, right?
Yep.
They had the retirement
his
number,
jersey,
and the way that they raised the specific jersey, it was upside down.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It was up. It was when they presented it. It was upside down.
I feel awful for him, honestly. If you were with, not only he was that obviously happened, but he was one of their top players, at least in school history. Yeah, just an awful look for. I mean, obviously, Zan, obviously with his school and stuff. I really am curious to see in terms of how he really feels about it. But if it came specifically from like a school that I attended or something I knew about, I'd just be like, man, like that's tough. I mean, it's tough in terms of, it was probably honestly I don't even know like how specifically like you fuck up. I mean, kind of the upside down thing with it. I mean, unless there was a massive malfunction, which I mean, could happen. I'm obviously not.
No, I don't think that's possible because the jersey was upside down. How could that be a malfunction? Like, don't they put the jersey in? They must have put it in upside down.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be a malfunction if the banner didn't come down, but somebody must have placed the jersey in upside down.
I guess so.
That's the only thing. By the way, you're saying you feel bad for Terrence Shannon Jr. I mean, I feel really bad for whoever fucked that up. That's who I feel bad for.
Yeah, don't get me wrong on that.
I feel way worse for whoever made that mistake. than I do for Terrence Shannon Jr. He probably watched it and was like, oh, whatever. Like, it's probably not that big of a deal. He was getting his jersey retired. But, like, the person who screws that up, I feel the worst for.
Yeah. No, I agree. I
don't know. It's not like, I'm sure they fixed it and everything. It was just kind of funny when they did it. It was just kind of funny. So I do want to go through my next. I do want to go through my new segment, which I'm just called tweets.
Okay.
So here it is. So tweets is basically like the comment section, but I respond to tweets.
Yep.
So here's a tweet that I have to respond to.
Okay.
Friendly reminder, Jordan at age 40 on one leg played all 82 games and started in the All-Star game. He would have his knee painfully drained of liquid after every game. His own teammates were shocked that he kept playing. Meanwhile, LeBron, I can't play. I have a sore ankle. First of all,
what?
There's a few things I have to get to with this. Your pro Michael Jordan argument is from when he was on the Wizards. Like, that's your pro Michael Jordan argument. Second of all, how did that season work out for Michael Jordan? Like sure, he played in the All-Star game, played all 82 games, and was, obviously not healthy and insisted on playing in the All-Star game. How well did Michael Jordan's tenure with the Wizards work out? I mean, LeBron is at least on a championship. LeBron is at least one of the best players, one of the 10 best players in the league right now. Not top 5, but top 10. And is at least a championship contender. Like, how good was Michael Jordan at the time? Second of all, it is true that Michael Jordan was a crazy competitor and just a psychopath in a lot of ways, sociopath in a lot of ways. To a level that LeBron is not. I don't think that necessarily proves anything about his legacy or how great of a player they were. Even that's really a good thing. Like, was it smart of Michael Jordan to play in the All-Star game when, again, an exhibition game that doesn't count for anything, when he really just wasn't healthy? Like, is it not better to be smarter about it than it is to just play through injuries in games that don't count? Like, I don't understand what that argument even is. Like, LeBron is honestly just being smart by sitting out the All-Star game. Like, I think it's just smart, given that he's 40 years old and is not what he once was. Like, I don't know. This is just not even a good argument. It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, like you mentioned, you're taking it specifically from the Wizards side in terms of basically, it's like when you look at Brady with the Bucks, right? People are going to look at his overall career. I mean, yeah, he obviously won the Super Bowl, but like, you look at a legend like that, and it's like, all right, you're going to start specifically talking about a team that he rarely played for as your massive first argument, and you pretty much want to follow it in which of like LeBron James sitting out specifically because of an All-Star game. Like, listen, LeBron is going to be fine. He is trying to get a championship at the age that he's trying to get right now. He just got one of the biggest European stars that comes in terms of his team. And I think that the last thing he needs specifically is to have an injury to linger for the second half of the season for a team that has a chance to win it all. So, yeah.
So it's just dumb. It's a dumb argument. And like I said before, they would have criticized him for playing in the All-Star game. He wasn't ready for ready for regular season games, like even the game against Charlotte. So you can't have it both ways.
Right.
All right. So that's our show this week. This is Moving the Goalpost. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart, Ben at Ben Kruse 144. You can follow all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com. You can listen to all shows on etbpodcast.com. You can listen to this show wherever you get your podcast. You can watch all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can follow this show across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. So see you guys. I'll be back next week. See you guys then.
See you.